Welcome back to the Sports Business Leaders Podcast. Today we're joined by Mike Lorenz. Thanks for joining the show, Mike.
Thanks for having me, Justin. Appreciate being here.
Yes, sir. Really excited to dive in. So, for everybody listening, Mike is the CEO and founder of NGU Sports Lighting. Excited to discuss the evolution of LED sports lighting and the business behind modern sports venues. Mike was a part of the leadership team at Ephesus Sports Lighting, which helped pioneer LED sports lighting solutions, including lighting the first LED Super Bowl stadium before the company was acquired by Eden in 2015. Today, through NGU Sports Lighting, Mike is helping professional teams, colleges, high schools, and municipalities modernize facilities with innovative lighting solutions and new financing models that remove barriers for venues looking to upgrade. In this conversation today, Mike's going to share the insights on building a category defining company, innovating within sports infrastructure, and what entrepreneurs need to focus and understand when doing business with teams and large sports organizations. So, with that said, Mike, I'd love to hear more about your journey and more about the origin of NGU Sports Lighting.
Well, appreciate that, Justin. Great introduction. My journey is probably a little bit atypical from some that might be sitting in my position. I had the good fortune to start my career in public accounting with Price Waterhouse and became a CPA back in the early 80s. And I kind of leveraged that platform to go on and run companies in different industries that were challenged with strategic needs, either growth issues, profitability issues, trying to adapt to a changing market. And I had the good fortune of working for quite a few people in that process. And I got the entrepreneurial bug and I wanted to go out and see if I could do something on my own. And so back in the early mid 2000s, 2010s, I formed a real estate business and actually built the first Marriott hybrid hotel, which was a courtyard and residence inn in one platform in upstate New York in a challenging, at that time, 2010 was a challenging time to build new real estate in America. And along that journey, I had a chance to meet another entrepreneur, Joe Casper, who was a semiconductor engineer. And he had this idea of building a new company that could manufacture LED chips. At that time, the focus of the business was really looking at the underlying technology. So we had formed a partnership and we looked at the market and realized that building a chip plant was very expensive and time consuming and required a lot of capital. And so we pivoted and decided to look at fixtures. And back in 2011, the LED lighting market was primarily dominated by companies manufacturing small output lighting fixtures, either for street applications, home applications, or office applications. So we decided to focus on the more challenging environment, which was industrial lighting and eventually sports lighting, and had the opportunity through a relationship in Syracuse to advise and design the first LED sports lighting system in America for the Syracuse War Memorial venue, which was an indoor arena that housed that time, the Tampa Bay Lightning.
I appreciate you sharing the background, how you started off with PwC, made the transition, and just identified an opportunity. And that's really cool with the hotel background as well. How you've taken it seems, and I'd love to hear more about this later in the conversation, but you've taken some, I'm sure, entrepreneurial lessons from your days in the hotel business to NGU Sports Lighting at this point. And so with that said, you must have identified a true need when it came to LED technology. So what was that initial impetus or the spark when you realized that this technology was going to transform how sports venues implement lighting solutions today?
Great question. Exactly the question we asked ourselves when we were first asked about the War Memorial. The time in Northeast grid was challenged and lights were constantly going off, power was being lost. And if you're running and operating a sporting venue and you're losing power, the restrike time for the old technology could be 20, 30 minutes and was very disruptive to a variety of things, including the fan experience, television broadcasting. And LED solved that issue. So the initial impetus for us was to be able to solve a problem with technology, legacy technology that had flaws, one of which was operational confidence and consistency. And the second was the huge consumption of energy. And so the driver for early adopters of sports LED lighting was primarily indoor venues that had a reliance need and also wanted to focus on the economic side of running their lighting system.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a something I was thinking about when you were talking was the Ravens 49ers Super Bowl from 2013 when the lights went out, and I'm not even sure if that was technology before the LED solutions came into play. I believe it was about 10 or 12 years ago at this point, but Anyways, with NGU Sports Lighting, as we've alluded to, you've worked across professional sports, colleges, high schools, and municipal venues. So one thing within sports business leaders is these are entrepreneurs, operators within the sports industry, and everybody has, as you know, one of the most important things when you're an entrepreneur is identifying who your target customer is. So for these different segments of the industry, Mike, would you mind sharing just a bit about how you meet the needs and expectations of different target markets, and how the expectations differ when you're working with organizations at different levels?
Absolutely. The interesting part of the evolution of LED sports lighting was initially the adoption, as I mentioned, was indoor venues that had a need to run their business more efficiently from a cost standpoint. When they determined that LED solid state lighting could do more than just be energy efficient, meaning you can control it dynamically with wireless control or wired control, you can introduce color and different types of entertainment scenes. It quickly became very popular for those types of markets that had fan experience as a primary driver for their marketing side of their business, which was predominantly the professional venues and some of the larger collegiate venues at the time. So the professional market was an early adopter of the technology because they felt that that technology would enhance the experience of the fan inside the venue, whether it was an outdoor stadium or an indoor arena, which was very important to their particular business. From there, the college market it took on the adoption, a lot of that driven by the energy side of things, being very environmentally conscious, energy sustainable, and some of their green principles was important to them to look at their requirements. They looked more at the pragmatic side of the technology. You know, what is the overall ROI that I can find in addition to being more energy sustainable? And because you have such a huge footprint of universities and the lights are constantly on for a variety of reasons. I remember a conversation with the folks at Duke. We were lighting their football stadium and we were talking about how often those lights were on during the year. And they said, well, we have, roughly at that time, maybe 5 or 6 games at home. We might have a few night games. Maybe the lights are on 10, 12 hours for those football games. But during basketball season, we put our stadium lights on for ambient campus lighting. So the lights are actually on a lot longer than just for the primary sport because we use that lighting for ambient purposes on campus. So that became a very big adopter of and a reason for adopting the technology at the collegiate level. High schools frankly, were more driven by the team spirit aspect of being able to introduce color lighting, which we invented at Ephesus, as well as dynamic scenes, which we also brought into the marketplace, which allowed you to take the platform of basic light and now utilize it for multiple applications beyond just primary sports lighting. So that became a huge driver for high schools, and then municipalities were functionally more pragmatic on, hey, how can I save money? How could I reduce maintenance costs? How could I be more energy efficient? So if you think about the market in a pyramid with professional on top, collegiate, high school, municipality, the adoption on the top has been fairly high. I would say over 80% of professional venues have adopted current LED technology. Some are in their second generation. You get to the bottom of the pyramid, which are the municipalities, and you find the adoption rate is less than 10%. And high schools are probably somewhere in the 10 to 20%, and colleges might be 20 to 30%. So still after 14 years, the market is fairly large and yet to convert from old technology to new technology.
Yeah, one of the biggest things is just that different stakeholders or different customers have different purposes for wanting to make the switch. And I think what you talked about earlier when it comes to professional teams, a lot of their focus was surrounding the fan experience. And then on the other side of things, when you think about the municipalities or even high schools, it's more so about the energy footprint. And I think that's a great learning lesson for entrepreneurs is just that if you can create a solution or if your existing solution is helping improve the outcome of your clients' deliverables, then at the end of the day, that's how you create value. And that's what you're doing with NGU lighting. And I love the way you talked about it. And I think that's just something that everybody can learn from.
Absolutely, and we're excited. You know, the benefits of LED lighting are well documented: energy efficiency, dynamic scenes, fan entertainment, better broadcasting, lower maintenance costs. The market's evolving, and yet the adoption, in my mind, was much slower than it should be. And asking our customers, what is that barrier to entry to the market? And it turned out to be capital. The systems are expensive relative to the old HID system. You're buying basically a computerized light that's hanging on a pole or hanging in the rafter of an arena or a gymnasium. So we introduced last year performance lighting delivered, which basically 100% shifts the risk of ownership and the cost of ownership from the customer to us. We did that because we believe we have the expertise and knowledge and capability to own and operate those systems on behalf of our clients. And we have a model where our clients pay for a certain level of light on a particular venue for a particular time frame under a true service contract. If the system falls below that expectation, no payment is made, and it protects our customer. It allows them to adopt the technology sooner and on a more robust level, and enables the market to grow in a way that up until now was unable to do so.
Yeah. This is also something that reminds me of a book that I just recently read. It's called $100 Million Offers by Alex Hormozy. And one of the concepts in that book is creating a grand slam offer. And if you can de-risk the offer in a way where the client has an out if it doesn't work out, that inevitably is going to increase your conversion rate because you are providing because that just it exudes confidence, and if you know that your product will deliver on what you say it will, then, it's something that I think will it like I said, inevitably work out either way.
Yeah, the what's happened in the dozen or so years since we introduced the technology into the market is obviously Ephesus, now owned by Cooper Lighting, which is now owned by Signify, which is the old Philips Lighting, largest lighting manufacturer in the world, has evolved the technology. They've introduced the fourth generation LED sports light. We're still competing on a direct purchase model, which is NGU's core business, with manufacturers and OEMs and private label companies that are coming out with their first generation technology. So if you're a customer trying to look at the plethora of opportunity, it's very daunting. And if it's someone who's saying, "Hey, I just need light at 50 foot candles on my football field when I need it. I need it to work. I need it to be able to be energy efficient. I need it to be reliable. I need it to be fan based entertainment. That's all I need." Trying to figure out all this other stuff that's getting overly technical is difficult. So we believe that by addressing that pain point and coming in with a solution that's true service driven by a company that's backed with what we think is the best technology in the world makes it easier for that customer to say yes.
I was first introduced to LED technology, maybe not first, but I became a lot more familiar with it through my alma mater, which is Gettysburg College, Division III school in Pennsylvania. I know they recently made the transition and added lights to Musselman Stadium, which is the stadium there. So I think that's incredible, and I think that's a good segue now that we're talking about teams in particular. As we've talked about today, you've worked closely with teams and venues and organizers for years. So, what advice would you give to sports entrepreneurs that are looking to grow their business with teams, venues, and organizers or operators and build trust with those people that I mentioned?
I I think the first piece of advice I would give if you have a passion in and around sports venues, operating parameters, and just the industry in total, is engage yourself with that market. I think you learn an awful lot about a market by meeting people and listening. I attended many trade shows, operators, venues, every chance I had to meet somebody that I felt had an insight that could educate me regarding what they were trying to accomplish and what their challenges were, made me a better entrepreneur and a better businessman. And then, as we said, trying to identify where is that piece of the market that has a need that's being unmet or being met in a way that's kind of challenging. I've always believed in American business principle. The entrepreneurs, the small businesses are where the changes occur because they're more nimble, they're a little bit more risk tolerant, and they're able to do things faster and more efficiently than some of the larger corporations. Then obviously making sure you have the team around you that can execute on your promised deliverable. And part of that for us involved capital. We're fortunate to have a capital partner, Leaf Financial Management, that's committed a significant amount of capital to support our idea behind performance lighting delivered. And it's all based on that relationship side and trust and being able to build those connections. I think there is a desire for people to meet and hear about new ideas. I think it's the market and just generally across the country, we're seeing that AI now is lowering the barrier of entry for companies to get involved with business and be more efficient and be more impacting. And I think those are some of the suggestions I would throw out for people to consider. And the first being, engage yourself with that audience and get to know the folks and build those relationships and understand what the needs and challenges might be that could help you form a company that can address them effectively.
And that's the whole thesis behind sports business leaders is that's what we do is we connect the innovators, the entrepreneurs in sports. And I agree wholeheartedly with what you said about small businesses, because at the end of the day, competition is what drives innovation. And that's what what we all believe in, and we see it every single day.
It's I was reflecting. I watched the Super Bowl. I'm a huge sports fan. We've had the opportunity, me personally, to have lit, I think 5 or 6 venues in a row for a while, and when I think about the first venue lit in the world with LED lighting as a stadium was the University of Phoenix Stadium in Glendale, Arizona for the Super Bowl of 2015. We were a startup company with 15 employees with a minimal track record, and we're able to build a relationship with the operators and the people responsible for that venue to convince them that the future of lighting is going to be LED and that we would like to be your partner. And we made sure we addressed their concerns that they obviously had with new technology. And that project really put LED sports lighting on the map. Beyond just Ephesus, it told the market, hey, this is technology that's arrived. You can be a factor. And it opened up the market now for many new competitors, which I believe is good for the industry generally. And I think it's fun to have been part of something that started that type of transition in a business like sports.
I don't hear about it too often when we're talking with the founder of somebody who's literally pioneered an industry and was a first mover. So I think that's incredible. And I did not know about 2015 with you lighting the stadium in Phoenix. And so you mentioned there was 5 or 6 Super Bowls that you've stadiums that you've lit.
I would the interesting thing, Justin, we were awarded the contract for the University of Phoenix Stadium, and I got a call from the Minnesota Vikings, someone from the Minnesota Vikings saying, "Hey, we're building a new stadium in Minnesota. We heard about your company. Can you make a presentation on Wednesday?" And I was in New Orleans with my wife on vacation, and it was warm in New Orleans and cold in Minneapolis. And I explained that I'm happy to come up, and I wasn't really prepared, so I walked into the room. It was a lukewarm reception, and so I was unsure what to do. So I basically said, "Hey, by a show of hands, how many of you have a phone? How many of you have a phone made by AT&T or Verizon? How many have a phone made by a technology company?" And I said, "The future of lighting is moving from old analog to new digital, and I'd love to be your partner." And we ended up signing on the Minnesota Vikings Stadium during the week of the Super Bowl in Phoenix. And then from there it was Miami and Atlanta, Las Vegas, and it just became something we were very proud of to be part of the transitioning of the business from old analog lighting to what we have now with solid state sports lighting.
Yeah, congratulations. And that's something that as the Minnesota Stadium, as an Eagles fan, has a special place in my heart with Super Bowl 52 being there.
Yeah.
But no, this is great. I appreciate the advice, Mike. And what else, if you had to go back maybe to 2015 or even before that, when you were first coming up with the business plans and ideas, what advice would you give yourself at that point outside of what you just mentioned, specifically about creating a market disrupting business? And then I appreciate that anecdote you mentioned with the meeting, but what advice would you give to building those relationships and creating that market disrupting type of business?
You want to disrupt a market or a business, I believe it requires 3 things. Number 1, the discipline to let the past go because it blocks the future. Our brain can think about one or the other, and the challenges of the past tend to limit our change going to the future. So the first thing I taught myself is let the past go, look at the future. The second thing that I learned was you're going to be alone often more than you're going to be with other people. Your ideas and your thinking and your process, people will nod and be friendly, but it's going to be you that's going to drive that. And the third thing, I named my company after Never Give Up, NGU. That's what I believe in. If you have that passion and that commitment, you never give up. And you find that the success is oftentimes a little bit less rewarding than the avoidance of failure, because you will have failure, right? That's part of it. But unless it's going to be fatal, which fortunately and hopefully it will never be, the success is worth it. And to be able to be part of something disruptive, and it does take a team, it's more than just one person. To change an industry as we did with Ephesus in a way that we did is just something I remember for the rest of my life and well worth the journey that we went on to achieve it.
Thank you for that, Mike, and that's great advice, and I've also experienced that as we're just about a year and a half into sports business leaders, so I've can definitely attest to the fact that you're gonna be alone, and it's harder than what you originally expected. You're gonna be alone a lot more often than you are around other people, even though we are an events company, but this is
Absolutely.
great.
I was going to say, I'll share this one story, which I frankly have never said publicly, but it's relevant to the question you asked. We put the lights at the University of Phoenix Stadium, and the deal that we thought initially was we'd leave the old lighting system in place in case the new lights didn't work. and we were set to broadcast the first game, which happened to be the season opening game for the NFL in Glendale. And it was Thursday. It took longer to get the lights in than we thought because we had crane issues, and we had 12 lights that wouldn't function properly out of 300. And long story short, we ended up having to delay the introduction of the lighting for 2 weeks, and our team was crushed. I remember being in the stadium, people working around the clock, and we could not get these 12 lights to function. And so we missed the window. We ended up lighting the first NFL game ever, the second home game rather than the first home game. But through that, we learned about what it would take to be successful going forward. And so that's an example of what I mentioned. People are going to be first Debbie doubters are going to say, "Hey, look, it's failing already." You got to overcome that. You just got to continue to move forward with your commitment to yourself and to what you believe is the right thing to do.
And I love the name and what that stands for, never give up. And that's something, as you talked about, you can't let the little things drag you down. And I know it sounds cheesy, but it really is true because there's always going to be something. There's always going to be a problem happening or somebody that's not happy. And you just have to, from what I've learned, and we've had folks like, for example, Rob Buccini, who after this podcast, I want to introduce you to if you don't already know him, but he's the co-owner of the Philadelphia Union and also has a company called BPG, Buccini Pollen Group. And one of the things that he always talked about was just having a clear vision. And no matter what happens in the scenarios that are happening in your day to day, you have to operate with that clear mindset. And so it sounds like, that's something that you've done in your career, which has led to tremendous success.
Absolutely. I appreciate that, Justin. Yeah, still at it, still working at it. You never can stop learning, which is the cool part of life, right?
I think we've hit a lot of great pieces of advice, Mike, but any last words that you'd like to share with the sports business leaders audience here?
I think from the sports leadership world, we are living in a fascinating time on many levels with sports and venues. You're seeing tremendous stadiums, arenas being built, complexes. We're seeing sports. You mentioned the union. Soccer's becoming much more popular. We're doing a lot of soccer projects around the country. I think if I had one suggestion is that just dream big and go where no one's gone before. This is the time of your career, of your life in America where you can actually dream of doing something that no one's done in a way that no one's done it. And we're seeing examples of that. And it's fun. It's fun to go out where you're on your own and you're changing. And if you're an operator and you're thinking about how do I, figure things out, take some chances with people that have some ideas that maybe, fit a different profile than what you might be used to doing business with in the past. And you'll find, as I have, that the ideas and the opportunities are just fascinating.
And what would be the best way for the sports business leaders community to keep in touch with you and learn more about NGU Lighting?
Absolutely. You can just drop me an email at Mike Lorenz at NGUSportsLighting.com, and I'll be very responsive.
All right. Mike Lorenz, thank you for joining the show.
Thanks,
Had a
Justin.
great conversation.
Appreciate it. Take care.